How's it going, everyone? All right, today we're going to be covering how to install Unifi-Poller on a Raspberry Pi inside of Docker. And I've seen a lot of people using Unifi-Poller. It's pretty much the best monitoring tool out. But I haven't seen many people go a video walkthrough for the Raspberry Pi, so I figured I would just show you to do it. So some of this video in the beginning, I'm going to assume that you got the Raspberry Pi online. But I will go back and show you just what it looks like to at least turn on SSHing. So that's the first thing we're going to do is SSH into our Raspberry Pi. You can also configure it if you have a monitor connected to it, but it's a little easier to do it this way from your laptop. So you just SSH Pi, which is the main user, at the IP address, and then you enter the password that you set up when you originally set up your Raspberry Pi. So first thing we're going to do after you run updates is you're going to install Docker. So that's what I'm doing right now, and I will post these instructions below in the comments or in the description, and I'll link out to it. So it's actually really easy. If you just follow along exactly with it, everything will work. It's pretty straightforward. So this is what it would look like when you first get your Pi up, and then if you type raspi hyphen or sudo raspi config. It's the configuration for the Pi. And you're going to go to interface and then SSH and just make sure you turn that on. Once you do that, then you can SSH like I did right in the beginning of the video. So I just figured I would show that. All right, so now we're back to the install. So we're getting Docker going. After that, we're going to add the user Pi to the group so it doesn't mess with any permissions. And then what we're going to do is reboot the Pi at this point. All right, now we're rebooting. Really nice thing about this one is too, if I mean, Raspberry Pis are so inexpensive these days. I mean, this is on a Raspberry Pi 4, but it's far easier to let the monitoring happen on, if you're not doing anything crazy, just to let it go on this little, computer rather than leaving a machine running all day or, running a Docker on your machine all day. You still have to keep it on. So, all right, we're going to SSH back in and all right, now we're back in. We're going to install DockerCompose now. That's just makes it very quick to install Docker containers. Because we're going to use that a little bit later in the video. All right, so now we've got that done. We need to go to our Unifi controller and set up a user. Because there is data does have to come from the whatever the controller is. So if it's a Dream Machine Pro or a Dream Machine, the controller will be self-hosted inside the actual hardware. We need to get logs out of that actually to Unifi-Poller. So we're going to create a limited admin user with these settings here. And that is the credentials you're going to be using for the rest of this setup. So now we're just going to make a couple directories here. Just keep everything nice and tidy. So we have Docker, and then we put those folders right inside of it. So now we're going to go into the Unifi-Poller folder. So it's just cd Unifi-Poller. Now we're going to run nano unifi-poller.config or conf. And then we're going to paste this in. And we're done with that. And then to get out of this, it's just Control X, Y, and then return. That will save it. Next, we're going to go up a level to the Docker folder. And we're going to do pretty much the same thing, only this time we're using nano DockerCompose period YAML. So to go up a level, just cd period period, and then we're going to create this file inside of the Docker folder. I already had one in there, so you just paste it in. I literally just ran through this to make sure it was all working fine. But you'll just paste the one from the description. And I don't actually think you have to make any changes on this one. Let me double check here. No, you don't. All right, so once we're done there, you're just going to type DockerCompose up, and it's going to build the Docker image. Now this is going to take a little bit, so I'll speed it up. So we're actually building out Grafana and IndexedDB. And so IndexedDB is going to be indexing the logs that we're pulling from the controller. And Grafana is going to be kind of front-ending it in a bunch of different graph and visual displays. And we'll see that here shortly. So once the Docker is fully built, give it a couple seconds. Sometimes it can take up to 30, I've seen. Wait for the Unifi-Poller commands to start coming before you move on. That's how you'll really know that it's done. And not those commands that are just flying by. You'll see right here at the end, it's going to be some metrics coming out. There we go. Okay, now to access it, the IP address is the IP address of your Raspberry Pi and port 3000. When you first get in there, you will have a login. It will be admin admin, and the second you enter that in, it will give you a prompt to change your password. So go ahead and do that at that time. The next thing we're going to have to do is add your data source to Grafana, and we have an InfluxDB as we set up. So you're going to go in after you've set your new password, and we're going to go to the plus sign, and then we're going to our data source, configuration, and then you're going to hit add new data source, I believe it is. And you're going to select InfluxDB. Now, the IP address you're going to use is the IP address of the Pi at port 8086. And the username and the credentials down below, you got to make sure you enter that. It's all going to just be Unifi unless you change them in the initial configuration files when you were setting this up. But by default, if you just followed along with this guide, it will all be Unifi, Unifi, Unifi. And now you've added your data source. Then all we need to do after we've got that all added, I've already added it, so I don't know if it's going to let me add it here, or it looks like it will, but I'm just going to delete it. So you'll have your data source in there, and then we're just going to be adding the panels that are kind of pre-built. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. If you click the plus in the top left side and go to import, and then you're just going to use the list from the left. These are kind of all pre-built, so you just paste it in and it will import it. If you already have it, like I already have it, it's not going to let me import it a second time. But essentially, all you need to do is go by one and just hit import, and then you'll have all of the panels ready to go. And I'll show you what that looks like. And then the last thing we need to do is go back to our terminal and stop your Docker. And then we're going to type docker-compose up-d. That will automatically start Docker as soon as the Raspberry Pi starts up. That way, all the logging and panels will be ready to go anytime you want it to start it, every time your Pi reboots or anything like that. And that's about it. And then you can see what the panels kind of look like here at the end. It's a pretty quick setup, but gives you a lot more data than the actual controller will. It's kind of a cool little project too if you want to get to know kind of how some of this stuff works. If you have any questions, feel free to open a ticket with us below or shoot me a comment. We'll try to reply as quickly as we can. Thanks.